You're listening to the Fresno Housing Spotlight, a behind-the-scenes look at how Fresno is working together to create housing opportunities and changing lives. I'm Tyrone Roderick Williams, CEO of Fresno Housing, and welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Fresno Housing Spotlight. Joining us are two very, very special people who are here to tell us about their journey in serving as Fresno Housing Board Chairs. Joining me is Adrian Jones, who is the board chair representing the city of Fresno, and Cary Catalano representing Fresno County. Welcome to the Fresno Spotlight. I have been waiting for many months to get the two of you here to join us. And today, you're going to have an opportunity to share with us about your pathway to becoming our board chairs at the Fresno Housing Commission. And you've got two very similar in some ways and divergent in other ways. But it is a joy to have you leading our board and serving the work of our agency, both in the city and the county. So to kind of kick it off, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, and then how did you move into the position of board chair representing the city of Fresno?
I'm glad you're first.
Well, as am I. The lady should be first. So thank you, Tyrone. Actually, thank you for this opportunity to join you here today to talk about the city of Fresno and housing and how I got here. A little bit about me. Actually, I was born to a very young mother in Fresno, class of 1965, Edison High School, my mom. And my grandfather was a local pastor here who had a passion for farm housing. So he was actually an advocate for farm housing. He was very instrumental in bringing Martin Luther King here in, I think it was 64 or whatever year he came to talk about the housing in Kerman. My grandparents, my paternal grandparents, my grandfather was a ERRN, so he was an emergency room registered nurse in the war, and they had a grocery store in Oakland, California that they opened in the early 50s, and that was my first introduction to credit. My grandmother used to give the people in the neighborhood credit for their food, and she'd have a stack of receipts at the end of the month, and on the first, everyone would come in to pay their bills. So on both sides of my family, literally, there was advocacy and activism. So that's kind of where my roots came from, and I had no idea. I came back to Fresno following a divorce after being gone 20 years. And when I got here, I was technically homeless because I was coming out of a divorce. I actually lived with my brother on his couch. I didn't have a job when I first got here. And I found myself actually applying for Section 8. As things would have it, I personally believe it was divine intervention, but I got on the list the second time I tried to call, which I understand is unheard of. I was able to get a voucher. And one of the first things that I did was apply for the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. I had a really good caseworker at that time, and they actually put together a 5-year plan. I had a high school diploma, 39 years old, and I decided, okay, I need to probably go get an AA. So that was my initial goal. And so we did that. I ended up getting the AA, and fast forward, I actually ended up getting a master's degree.
So starting with the AA, all the way up to a master's degree, from sleeping on your brother's couch after a divorce and showing up in Fresno.
That is correct. That is correct. In the process, I got a phone call out of the clear blue sky asking me to come down to the Housing Authority to speak to, at the time, was our interim CEO. He offered me the opportunity to serve on the board as a resident commissioner. I had no idea what that entailed. All I know is that as a resident, I had done quite a bit of complaining. So when he called, I thought that that is what he was calling about. So I showed up with my notebook of complaints and notes, but he offered me the opportunity to become a resident commissioner, and that was 14 years ago. I am the first resident commissioner to become a quote-unquote regular commissioner, and I'm now the first former resident to become the chair of this board and the first black woman to become chair of this board.
So you're breaking all kinds of barriers and setting the pace for upcoming generations.
That is the goal.
That's the goal. Well, your story has so many elements to it, and we'll come back a little later and kind of talk about those different elements. But Mr. Catalano, you've come quite a ways, sir.
Yeah, I think that Adrian and I serve a journey that's very similar together, and we were meant to serve together as co-chairs of the Housing Authority. You know, my mom and father did the best they could as parents. We were poor. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad was absent most of my life. He did the best he could. They both did the best that they could with what they had to offer, but it's nothing that you would consider to be stable or inviting for most. And so I had to learn early on how to take care of myself. I've been on my own since high school. I put myself through college. I'm the first one to go to college. I never thought that I would be serving on a board because I was always told growing up that I wasn't really going to amount to anything, but I was very blessed to have many good people around me telling me you could be whatever you want, you can achieve whatever you want, but you have to work hard, but remember to always be true to yourself. And so getting involved in the community was what my neighbor had me do to show that, there's more to life than just you, that life gives you many blessings and you have to give it back. And I'm sure many people wish they could rewind and say, no, don't get started in local politics, because it has really been everything that I've done to give back to our community. So, everything that I've done is who I am, and I don't know who I'll be tomorrow because today's experiences change who I am every day. So my journey of getting on the Housing Authority board was unique. I was on the city side when I first met Adrian, and I was really excited that before I left the city side in 2011, that she had became vice chair. And it's been really an honor to serve with her as co-chair on the county side. But when I think about what we do, my life experiences and what I do every day for a living of owning my own company, trying to help nonprofits raise money, it really gets back to the roots of everything I am as a human being. It's giving to others while not losing my voice in between. So you've been really great about that yourself.
Well, for those who may not really understand the role of the commissioners and the board chairs, the commission serves as the overarching guiding entity that works regarding the policies and procedures and approves the funding and many of the projects that move forward from the Housing Authority. And so the role of commissioners, and specifically the roles of the commission chairs, is very important to our agency functioning at its highest capacity. And what I'd like for each one of you to kind of talk about what are some of the issues related to the city and the county that you find the most challenging when it comes to leading, our board.
I think before we get there, I think that the biggest challenge that we've had, I became her co-chair at the time that we were doing a search for a new CEO. So the biggest responsibility and the biggest task that we have had together was conducting the national search that led us to hiring you. And so, hiring the CEO has been the biggest task. We had our first new CEO in 11 and a half years. And so we led that charge. And the biggest task as chair is finding that new CEO, which we did, which brought us to you. And then also as chairs, it's working with our CEO to help create a vision that not only our board and our staff, but our community could buy into. And that's the biggest role as a chair as well, too. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, and probably the biggest challenge as well, as Cary mentioned, the buy-in. You know, we are definitely in one of the a very poverty-stricken area, and it has been this way for a very long time. And so, some of the ideas, some of the visions may not resonate across the board. So exactly as Cary said, some of the buy-in of the things that we are trying to do to really move the needle and to really help people, as Cary would always says, to elevate people out of poverty.
Well, the role of the commissioner and the board chair is really a volunteer opportunity that many times feels much
like a full-time job.
Like a full-time job. So, what are some of the challenges that you're facing specifically as a board chair, trying to balance work, and we always talk about work-life balance, but also, you know, other issues that arise that come to you specifically because you are a board chair representing the city and also the county?
Well, right now we are actually in our budget season. So budget is definitely a huge responsibility. At the end of the day, the buck kind of stops with us. As the chairs, we tend to have the information prior to the rest of the board. So as the chairs and along with our executive board, we make some decisions and feel out where staff is with the budget, but even trying to help again with the balancing piece of that and to determine are the priorities aligning with our vision and our mission? Are the priorities aligning with what it is we're trying to do in the moment? Because as Cary also mentioned, things change so rapidly. We just came out of a horrendous pandemic that no one was prepared for. Our budget in 2019 had nothing to do with what was going to happen for the next 3 years. So now here we are in 2022 looking at the damage that happened for the past 3 years. So again, helping the board be cohesive is a challenge because there are 14 of us on a full board and there might be 14 different priorities. So sucks to be you, but for us, we only have 7 on each side that we need to try to just be in alliance. And we have also realized that we are not going to always sing Kumbaya. We're not going to always be in complete agreement. This is a democracy and the majority wins, but to really try to get the buy-in that everything that we're doing is at the end of the day to help our families here in Fresno. So if the budget looks kind of funky, if we have to take money from Peter to pay Paul, which a lot of us know how to do anyway, you know, that is a challenge for us when we have to make a decision on development versus services. So those types of things are definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I think it's a unique opportunity to serve on this board. It's like no other public agency in Fresno County. We have the ability to change lives generationally, and our biggest push as a board of commissioners has been we've changed drastically as a board over the last 5 years, and the focus has really been we're never going to be able to build enough monuments to house people, so we need to look at the way that we deliver a better product to lift families out of poverty. And so when we did the national search to find our new CEO, we needed a CEO that believed in that philosophy. Yes, we must provide shelter, but we also must agree we must be barrier busters. Like for me, I had someone that said, you can and you will go to college. And when the system tried to keep me where it wanted to keep me, was poor and broke and forgotten, I had an advocate. I had more than one. I had 2 or 3, and I was a white male. So I was able to get through these barriers even more quickly. The job at Fresno Housing Authority is to make sure, regardless of where you are in your life, that we are doing all that we can. We're not going to be perfect. We're going to stumble along the way, but at the end of the day, our job as a board is to give our staff some strategic guidance on where we see us going, and then to let our staff execute. That is difficult sometimes for a board chairs to allow the staff to execute because we're so intimately involved in the work that needs to be done. And so it's always a delicate balance because we report to appointing officials, which are the elected officials of Fresno County or the city of Fresno. And then we report to our colleagues that appoint us to serve at their pleasure in the chairmanship. So we're dealing with more than 14 personalities. At times we're dealing with 20, which could be competing factors. So our job is to be the buffer for the CEO, right, Tyrone? And sometimes that's exhausting. It's a full-time, let's not be full to all you watching. It's a full-time job that I wouldn't trade the world for. I'm really honored to be given this privilege to work with the two of you and everybody else. So,
Well, the impact that you all and all the rest of the commissioners is having is really being felt across the county. You know, we serve over 50,000 people every single day across the city and the county. And it's the work of the commission that enables us to be able to do that. And a large portion of our work is really around affordable housing development. We have resident development and empowerment. We have affordable housing development. Talk to us a little bit about how you all have been involved in just looking and approving at projects. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 years to get out of the ground, but then you get to cut the ribbon, and all of that time, energy, work, and effort is all worth it.
yeah, I think for me, you know, because I was on in 2010, then I came back in 2017. You know, for me, it's making sure that every segment of every part of our county, including the city, because the city and the county are really one, have opportunities to equitable, quality housing. And so our job as a board, you know, sometimes difficult for staff, is to identify neighborhoods that need these key investments and need hope. Because oftentimes the private sector isn't looking at neighborhoods because they find them to be undesirable, or there's been a natural redlining of where maybe resources can or should not go. Our job has been to identify those neighborhoods and be the infusion of millions of dollars of capital. And so we've been very strategic where these projects go, don't you think?
Absolutely. We have a phenomenal development department. And
Yes.
so literally starting from either someone on the board or whoever decides or finds area that they feel that we need to look at, from approving, okay, board, you know, we found a
Piece of land.
piece of land somewhere that we'd like to bid on. So literally starting from the idea of a neighborhood all the way through to construction and, as you said, the ribbon cutting. But one of the very key things that we tend to really be concerned with is our cost per door. That is one of our main areas of concern. You know, it is a lot of money. Sometimes people don't understand for public housing all of the ins and outs of the financing, because it kind of doesn't make sense. And that's one of the things I have often said to development, like, talk to me like a third grader. Like, I don't understand why it's costing so much. So that is probably the biggest thing that we really pay attention to outside of the neighborhood. And always at this point, we are looking for neighborhoods of opportunity. We are hoping that we can develop in areas where the children are going to better schools, where they have access to produce and transportation. So things like that are things that we pay attention to as we develop.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is sometimes we're the catalyst for change in a neighborhood. And I think that we have been fighting the cost per door for a very long time. And we would explain it to death, but we just said history will be on our side. And if you look at the housing market today and the cost per door for private developers, it's almost equal, because a lot of them are tapping into a lot of the same funding streams that we've always received, and now they get it. But it took a little bit of time for them to understand. It's like, oh my gosh. So we're not doing anything, but you know, we're really getting money from investors that are investing in our future. So sometimes it costs a little bit more to get those pennies.
Well, I've got one more question.
One more.
Yes. And what is one thing that you would want people to know about Fresno housing that they may not know?
Oh, you're
one thing, each one of you.
Ooh.
I would want people to know that we are more than housers, that we are currently making a very intentional effort to address the families in the housing that we provide, that we are actively working on ways, not looking at, not talking about it. We are actively, currently, right now in November of 2022, working on programs that will hopefully help lift those families that would like to be lifted out of housing.
Very good.
And I would just really ditto that. I think she said everything I would say. We are not the public housing agency of our country's history. We are not warehousing people. We are providing quality, exciting living conditions for people to live in neighborhoods all across our region. It's not poor people's housing. It's families housing, individuals housing. And that's one rumor we would like to put to bed forever.
Well, I really appreciate our time together, and we've come to the end of this particular time. I will look forward to having you back on the Spotlight. Again, there's plenty to discuss, and our goal at Fresno Housing is really that we are changing lives. We're empowering our residents. We are changing neighborhoods and in engaging with our residents and the communities in which we serve. And so we invite you to continue and listen to this podcast and other podcasts. And you can always find more about what's going on at Fresno Housing by visiting us at our website at fresnohousing.org, or find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, on all social media outlets. Until next time, thank you for joining us here on Fresno Housing Spotlight.